Hello there. A huge welcome to the Gina Gardiner and Friends show, and I'm absolutely delighted to be able to introduce Pamela Thompson to you as my guest today. Hi, Pamela.
Hi, Gina. I'm very pleased to be here.
Before we get started, let me share with people just a little about you. Pamela is the author of a #1 best-selling book called Learning to Dance with Life, and will soon be launching her second book, The Exploits of Minerva. She is passionate about supporting women to reinvent themselves. And today's show is going to be sharing her story and her work and how that can make such a difference, particularly for women, although I think the principles are true for everybody. Pamela, let's start by giving people a potted version of your history and how you came to be here.
Yes, and Gina, as you know, if we've been on this planet for a few decades and we're people who get bored fairly easily, we do a number of things. So the first part of my life, I was very driven and very left brain dominant and really dubbed down my creative side and didn't really acknowledge it. And I think that's what a lot of women do. They emulate their fathers or a man in their life, and they don't recognize the creative side of their mothers. And so I went doing that for a while, and I was very successful in the careers that I had, and also in my first business that I launched, which was primarily consulting. And then I ended up reconnecting with my creative side and launched a creative healing center on the web a number of years ago. And part of what we did is we coach people through a variety of life transitions, men and women. And I had a network of coaches in Canada and the States. So that started me on really reconnecting with my creative side and recognizing the value of it, and realizing that we need both our logical left brain and our right brain and our masculine and feminine sides to be truly whole. And this is for men as well as women. I guess, if I may, I'll share a story that really came out for me in terms of one of the keys in my book, Learning to Dance with Life, is listen to and trust in your body's wisdom. And for a long time, I didn't realize I was doing that, but I intuitively was. I would leave if I get in a situation and I would think to myself, I'm not really getting juiced by this job anymore. I wonder what else is out there. And then I'd meet somebody and an incredible opportunity would come up.
Yeah.
Right. And then, or I'd say, who do I know? Like, I wanted to move from doing largely domestic consulting to international. Who do I know? And take them out for lunch. And then an opportunity bigger than I ever imagined could appear. So I guess I'll stop there, because it's, there's a lot of things I've done. However, that gives the listeners a snippet of my journey.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because there's a number of principles there, I think, that are important to draw out. And one of those is being in tune with and listening to your body and those inner thoughts that we often ignore because they seem inconsequential, or perhaps they feel fanciful. But the other thing about that is that when opportunities come along, and that you've made a lot of opportunities by taking particular action, that you've actually engaged with those activities and those opportunities in full, where I think many people are fearful. An opportunity comes up and they think, well, that's too big for me. Maybe I can't do that. Or what if I fail? Or what if I look silly? Or what if I succeed? And they let the opportunity go. So please share with us how you've moved forward and grabbed those opportunities and what's been the result.
I'll share, a story that I think might be helpful. About 18 months into my first coaching business, I was feeling frustrated. I was feeling that we weren't making a big enough impact fast enough. And I happened at the time to be taking a body-centered coaching program to augment the other coaching that I'd studied. And it was the last class, and the instructor said, it was via teleconference, find a line on the floor. And nobody else was putting their hand up, so I offered to do the demo. She said, find a line on the floor and imagine something that you really want. Now notice any fears, emotions, negative thoughts that come up for you, and imagine each one of them as a rock in your knapsack on your back. Now feel them, feel the weight of them. Now release them and let them go. Now imagine crossing that line however you wish. Walk across it, run across it, jump across it, and say aloud what you want. And I loved to cross that line, and I said, I want to play big. Within 2 weeks, I got an email offering me to throw my hat into the ring for one of 3 positions in Afghanistan. And one of them had my name on it, Gina. It was Senior Technical Advisor, Strategic Planning and Performance Measurement. So anyway, long and the short, talked to my partner. He was in total support of me going and living in Kabul originally for 9 months, working with the Ministry of Public Health to help them develop their first strategic plan and building the capacity of teams to do planning. 2 weeks later, I was part of the interview process, and a month later, I was on the ground in Kabul.
Wow.
The contract. It was that fast. So what that does is, to me, it shows the power of when you set an intention to do something and you really believe you can do it. I wasn't even specific about what I wanted, but I said I want to play big. I got there, Gina. 74 departments, the Ministry of Health for the country, their first strategic plan. And there were times where I thought, oh my God, well, goodness, will my processes work? Because I'm also a facilitator. And I said, trust, it's going to work, because I want to let the listeners know that, even though we're strong, we set intentions, we still have fears during the process. Yeah. And then we need to go into our bodies and trust and know that we're being supported to do the work, and know in our hearts why we're doing it. And it was amazing. It was truly life-changing experience. And I know, and the other thing is, you'll never guess what that line on the floor was, Gina.
Cool.
That I across. It was an Afghan prayer mat that my technical team in Pakistan had gifted me a number of years before.
Wow.
Doesn't that just give you goosebumps?
There are a lot of things to unpack in that, and this is a very short show. So, but what strikes me is how many people are bowed down, ground down by the rocks in their knapsack, their limiting beliefs, their fears, their wondering about what other people will think, all of those that are keeping them playing small. And I think the symbolism of jumping over the line without those things in your knapsack is really important. And so if you're listening to this, I'd ask you to think about, how many rocks have you got in your knapsack? Before the break, Pamela was talking about the most amazing experience of being on a course and being asked to consider that each fear that was holding her back as a sort of rock in the knapsack, and letting it go and stating what she wanted. And I think I'd like to just spend a couple of minutes with you exploring the importance of knowing what you want, because so many people know what they don't want, and they talk about what they don't want, but they're not clear about what they want and the purpose of what they want. What are your thoughts about that?
I have a number of thoughts about that. And that's very true what you're saying. I guess what I feel, Gina, is really important is, before people get to that point, they need to let go of certain things.
Okay.
So I have a 5-step art of change framework that's based on the metaphor life is a dance, and underpinned by the belief that embracing change is a creative process that opens you up to new possibilities. And what I've done is I've drawn heavily on the work of William Bridges. Do you know him, Gina? Have you heard of him?
No.
He was an organizational theorist. Sadly, he's passed, and he worked for over 30 years with people in organizations. And based on that, what he did is he identified that regardless of the life transition you're going through, there are 3 distinct phases: an ending, a neutral zone, and a new beginning. And if we don't do the work associated with each of those phases, we keep repeating the same patterns in our lives and remaining frustrated and unfulfilled. So 2 pieces. One that I think is really helpful to understand is Bridges defined a life transition and a life change differently. He said that a life change is something external and situational to us, something tangible that you can see, like a separation agreement, a pink slip, if you're being let go. And whereas a transition is something internal and psychological. So it's internal psychological work you do to reinvent and reorient yourself to your new external reality. What happens, Gina, is a lot of people do the change, but they don't do the internal work. And so hence they keep repeating the same pattern. So to respond to your question directly, in order to envision what you truly want, it's really important to do that work of that ending, the first phase, which is letting go. It could be letting go if it's a relationship, letting go of the financial security of being being in a couple, letting go of the status of being in a couple, letting go of the anger you have toward your ex, whatever it is, right? And I've actually added to this phase, identifying lessons learned, identifying truly what you learned from, say, that relationship. If your husband wasn't, or a partner wasn't a good communicator, maybe that's top of your list. You want a man who you can truly connect with at the heart level. Just say, as an example. So that's the ending, letting go, identifying lessons learned. And this neutral zone is the scary place for people, because it's when you've taken a leap, you've left the relationship, you've left the job, and you're sort of out there and waiting for something to happen and you're not sure what it is. And that's the part that's scary, but it's also the creative space, because that's when you get to envision that relationship, that business, that life of your dreams. But many people get afraid in that part, as you pointed out. And so they go back to the person they had been with, because they realize after dating a few men that maybe he's not so bad after all, or she isn't so bad after all. And they settle, but they're not really happy. And it keeps coming up and coming up until they really do make the leap. And then the new beginning is when after you've envisioned what you want in that creative space, that neutral zone, you create an action plan to move toward it. So my answer to the question is, people really need, I believe, to understand this process and apply the lessons to it. And that's why I've created it, so people can understand how they respond to change and why, and not only focus on the change, but focus on that transit. I call it the transition journey, and really getting in touch with what they need to let go of, having the opportunity and taking the space to envision what they want, and then taking action, concrete action toward that vision.
I think having that plan, that technique, if you like, that's not the right wording, but having seeing the sequentialness of the process, I think, is really helpful. I find it fascinating that change is one of the constants in life, a bit like death and taxes. We're changing all the time. Life is changing all the time, and we'd be very unhappy if we were stuck with Groundhog Day, wouldn't we? We'd be bored out of our brain.
Totally.
And yet people fear change, and so often they anticipate that the change is going to be negative, and so they're already down a rabbit hole of but what ifs, and not enjoying the now because they're so worried about the change that's about to happen. But I think using your structure of recognizing that letting go and learning the lesson, for me, that's so important. What are the lessons that I can learn, and taking that forward and having that space, that creative space where let's just be curious. Let's just have a look and see what's available. I'm not closing things down, because I think so many people, they jump from the fire into the frying pan, or because they're frightened.
Yes.
We're going to go for a quick break. When we come back, I'm really interested in your second book and what you're doing now, and how you're helping people. So please don't go away. We're going to hear so much more when we come back. Welcome back. Now, Pamela, I know you have another book that's pretty well ready to go. Tell us about that book.
Well, thanks for asking, Gina. It's called The Exploits of Minerva, Reflections of a 60-something Woman. Now, the context for this book is 6 women who have been supporting each other for more than 20 years in a women's circle through a variety of life transitions: burnout, separation and divorce, loss of the love of their lives, finding the love of their life. And it's told through the eyes of Minerva, who's quite playful. She's partly autobiographical, However, I
Okay.
discovered her essence years ago riding on a bicycle trail. She came to me and then I shelved her, and she came back a couple of years ago and said, okay, you have to write about me now. And what I did for the other 5 characters is I interviewed friends and friends of friends to get their rich, real, and raw stories about various transitions they went through. So my intention for writing the book is for women to better understand each other. For if they're young women, it could be to understand their nanas. It could be other women who are widows and feel like they're totally all alone in the world and realize they're not. And it could also be for men, even target, if you will, to better understand the women in their lives and the different transitions people go through. And so, yes, so I really had a lot of fun writing this book. And initially I thought it was fiction. However, then I was talking with with my publisher and my publishing coordinator, and we realized it's creative nonfiction. So it actually has a story arc and draws people in by the story, but the stories are real.
It's interesting, isn't it, the power of story, that we are often able to take on board the essence of the story in a way that's very different if somebody said this is what you need to do or this is what you need to think about. But being presented with a story and being engaged emotionally with that story almost gives us greater permission to consider our own role and how that story resonates with us.
That's a beautiful way to explain the benefits of storytelling. I love that, Gina.
So what for you now, what are the things that you're doing and how are you helping people?
Thanks for asking. Well, right now I've been doing market research for a new group program I want to launch called Reinvent Yourself, Let Go of Fear and Navigate Change with Clarity and Confidence. Because the women I've been interviewing have been telling me that they need to gain confidence. They want more clarity, as we've spoken, about where they want to go, whether it's start that new business, leave that full-time job, go to a company that has work that's more meaningful to them, whatever it is. And so that's my focus right now. So I'm really going back to supporting business and professional women to reinvent themselves. And so I'm doing that. And then I'm switching my keynote speaking to workshops. So I'm really going pretty well all virtual. I've lived and worked on 5 continents. I don't need to get on a plane to go and speak somewhere anymore. So I'm really, looking at how do I take what I've done and put it all online and really support women at this point to reinvent themselves, particularly women in midlife and beyond.
I think so many people, particularly after the pandemic, have taken the opportunity to take stock and say, I don't want this anymore. I want to do something different, but don't always know how. That it seems beyond realistic to move from, a well-paid job where they seem to be successful to do something that actually is much more heart-centered and really fulfills them rather than just pays the check.
Yes.
The other thing I think that struck me is you're talking about the story being about women who are in their 60s, and as a woman in her 60s who started a new business, a second business in her 60s, I think at one time, by the time you reached your 60s, you were seen as past it and that you didn't have much to offer. And one of the things that strikes me that you are the very epitome of, here is a wise woman who's spent decades creating and deepening her wisdom, and now you are in a position to share it in an even bigger way than you always have done. And I think, the message to women out there who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, which is you have a really important place in society. And we need you to be taking that place and sharing your wisdom.
Yes, and I thank you for that. And I believe it's so. The world, what do they say? 70's the new 50 or something like
I
that.
think that's very true. I mean, not just physically, when you look at women now in the media, for example, who, you look at them and think, my goodness, they are, 50, 60, 70, 80, and they do not look their age, nor do they act their age, in the sense of that they're not acting old, they're acting vibrant and alive and making a real contribution to society.
Yes, it's very true. And there was something I was just going to add to what we were saying in terms of reinventing ourselves. And it's just jumped out of my head. Oh, I know. One of the things that has really I've connected with in the last couple of years is feminine leadership.
Yeah.
And the need for organizations to bring up the feminine to balance the masculine. So when I think about feminine leadership, I think about qualities such as creativity, collaboration, emotional intelligence, inclusiveness, the qualities typically associated with the female. So anyway, several years ago, I believe there are no accidents, I connected with Ingun Boll, the founder of an incredible social movement called Female Wave of Change, now in about 40 countries. And after an interview process, I was asked to be ambassador for Canada to build that movement in Canada. So, and part of that commitment was to create a legal entity. So to that end, in December of 2020, I launched a nonprofit. One of the things I hadn't yet done in my life. It's called Female Wave of Change Canada, and I'm currently building that community in Canada.
That's amazing. I do believe, I believe very much that men and women have much to offer. I think it's very easy to assign men and women with different qualities. And I think those of you that are listening, if you're a male, recognize that you have lots of capacity to engage with those feminine attributes and approaches to leadership. And for women, I believe that you have such an important role, whether you're leading your family or your business or your community, that this is time to stand up and to actually become a beacon of light for others, because we sorely need it when you look at what's going on around the world.
We definitely do. And I guess that's why I really connected with Ingun's message. And just so you know, there are men who are part of this movement. And I always, when I speak, say that men as well as women can have and learn these qualities.
Absolutely. We're getting towards the end of the show. And, the things that we've been talking about, I think, are just so important. And where can people find you?
Very easily on the web. My website's Pamela-Thompson.com, and that's THOMPSON. And also, if you're interested in Female Wave of Change Canada, FWOCCanada.com.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for being my guest. Thank you for listening. I hope you found the program of value to you. Please email me at Gina, Gina, at genuinely-u.com, and let us know what you think. And if there are any particular themes you'd like us to cover, then let us know. I'd love to hear from you. Do take care, and I look forward to meeting you with the next show. And Pamela, thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Gina.
It's been a pleasure.